Okay, so we're going to move on now. This is going to be part 5. And I realize we really need to talk about murder and voluntary manslaughter at the same time. So the quizzes you're going to get for this week or for the week of voluntary manslaughter, you'll be voluntary manslaughter questions for the practice quiz. But just in kind of evaluating how I was going to put this on a video, I realized we really need to talk about murder and voluntary manslaughter at the same time. So let's start at the very beginning, where we know already that with any good homicide, someone's got to die. So we got to start with a dead body. And as I said in the earlier videos, homicide is a generic term. If we use the term correctly, it describes the killing of one human being by another, but it's the umbrella that covers everything else. So you can have a lawful homicide and you can have an unlawful homicide, such as murder. Oftentimes, just people in general will talk about to say, well, there was a homicide, and they're really talking about murder, so it's implied. But I want you to understand the technical term, the correct term for homicide, which is the killing of one human being by another. It does not identify for you whether it's lawful or unlawful. All right, we talked about lawful homicide versus unlawful homicide, and I don't want to repeat it too much, other than that this is really a key issue when you talk about murder, when you talk about voluntary manslaughter. Your first discussion is going to be whether or not the killing was lawful or unlawful, because if you have to discuss murder or voluntary manslaughter, and a person will only qualify for murder, they only qualify for voluntary manslaughter if the killing was unlawful, meaning that it's not excusable and it is not justifiable. So it's a process of elimination. When we talk about whether a killing is unlawful, we're talking about using a process of elimination. To determine whether something is unlawful, you have to determine whether it's lawful, meaning if it's not excusable, if it's not justifiable, it's unlawful. If it doesn't fit in the category of excusable, if it does not fit in the category of justifiable, then it's an unlawful killing. And now we can move on to talk about murder. And now we can moving on to talk about voluntary manslaughter. So in your discussion for essays, in your discussion and evaluation of a crime or possible crime to determine whether it's murder or voluntary manslaughter, the very first question you have to answer is, was the killing lawful or was the killing unlawful? So when I talk about putting elements in the form of a question, that's the question that you're asking. Was the killing unlawful? That's straightforward, that's simple. Your next sentence would be, a lawful killing is one that's excusable or justifiable. And then you have to go on and talk about the facts and whether those facts fit under the umbrella of excusable or whether it fits under justifiable. If it doesn't, then it's going to be considered unlawful. Okay, so this is just a slide that says homicide is everything. It's lawful killings, it's excusable, justifiable, and it's unlawful killings. Murder, manslaughter, and negligence. So it's just a generic term that says somebody killed somebody else. Criminal homicide, if you look to the right, criminal homicide are murder, manslaughter, negligent homicide. And under manslaughter, you have voluntary and involuntary. All right, so murder. To prove that the defendant is guilty of murder, the people must prove that the defendant committed an act that caused the death of another person. When the defendant acted, he or she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. He or she killed without lawful excuse or justification. So again, it has to be unlawful, okay? And we're going to get to malice here in a minute. So here's a definition of murder. Murder is the unlawful killing without justification or excuse of one human being by another human being with malice aforethought. For me, in my head, murder is a lot like conspiracy. The definitions are not complicated, but the legal concept can be complicated. It can be if you don't approach it correctly. Okay, so if you broke down murder to its most basic concepts, you have a killing, which is your actus reus, and you have your malice aforethought, which is the mens rea. So it's the state of mind, right? Malice aforethought is that state of mind when you committed the killing. All right, so there has to, with murder, there has to be a concurrence of the intent and the act. They have to match. So I can have the intent to kill somebody, and I can actually kill that person, but it's not necessarily going to be murder. So let me give you an example. Let's say, in theory, that I decide that I'm going to take out my mother-in-law. I'm sorry, my sister-in-law. Now, she's been living with us since we've been under this rule of social distancing. She didn't understand what social distancing apparently is because she's living with us. So in theory, let's say that I'm fed up with my sister-in-law, which oftentimes I am, and I'm going to now solve the problem, right? Not the best problem solver, but my solution is to take her out. I have the intent to kill her. I go to Walmart, right? I wait in line. I go to Walmart. I buy myself a shotgun. I'm ready to kill my sister-in-law. I pull into the driveway, and then I realize I forgot to buy shotgun shells. I back the car out of the driveway at a safe speed, and the car feels like it's going over a bump. I say, oh, that's odd. So I stop the car. I put it in drive, and I drive forward, going over the bump a second time. And then I get out of my vehicle, and lo and behold, what happens? It's my sister-in-law laying on the ground. I drove over her, not once, but twice. I had the intent to kill my sister-in-law, and I actually am the cause of death. I ran her over with my vehicle. But that is not murder, because at the time I ran her over, I didn't realize I was running her over. So at the time that I actually committed the death or the killing, I didn't have the intent to kill. Generally, I had the intent to kill. At some point, I was going to do it, but they don't match up. They don't match up. The intent to kill and the actual act of killing did not happen at the same time. So with murder, it has to be concurrent. They have to happen at the same time, the act and the intent. All right. All right. So the crime of murder is unique in that if you kill somebody that is pregnant with a child, they can be charged for the death of the unborn offspring. So politically, this is a sensitive subject because many other crimes do not allow the law to pursue someone who has caused the death of a fetus. For instance, if you have a woman who is using methamphetamine and the baby either dies or, the baby is affected by the use of the methamphetamine and is born addicted to methamphetamine, you can't charge the person with child abuse because that's just the law. But with murder, you can charge somebody with the death of the unborn child. So something you should know. Okay. The challenge, I think, for most students is wrapping their head around malice aforethought. Malice aforethought is a term of art. So when we think of malice, we think of evil heart. We think of, somebody who is a bad person, who, is evil, wants to do evil things. But that's not what malice aforethought is. Malice aforethought is a term of art, right? It's a word or words that are used to describe a particular pattern of behavior. It's like telling your friend, it's like saying, well, who's your friend Johnny? Oh, Johnny's a badass. Well, we're not saying literally that he has something wrong with his butt. we're saying that he is a tough guy or he's really cool, or when we use the word badass, it's not a, you don't interpret that literally. It represents something. So malice aforethought represents the state of mind that you have to have at the time of the killing. So in order to qualify for murder, there are four different ways to establish the mental state that's required for murder. The malice aforethought. Malice aforethought equals these four different ways, and you only need one in order to establish the crime of murder. I'll say it again. You only need one to establish the crime of murder. There's express malice, meaning the intent to kill, and implied malice. We're going to let's get to the definitions. All right, here you go. Malice aforethought is a term of art. It means that using the words, it expresses a certain mental state that you have to have in order to be convicted of murder. There's only four. Don't make it more complicated than that. These are the four elements that you need to put in bullet point form, which I've already done for you. These are the four elements that you need to put in the form of a question. So the big question is, did this defendant have malice aforethought? Next question, did they have the intent to kill? Or did they have the intent to commit grievous bodily injury? Or did they have a reckless indifference for the value of human life? And the last one is, did they have an intent to commit one of the enumerated felonies? And I'm going to give you a list of felonies. In California, we just got rid of this element number 4. We just by law, we just changed it so it's no longer a part of our definition of murder. But under the common law and in many other states, there still is this fourth element of an intent to commit an enumerated felony. In other words, an intent to commit an enumerated felony means if you intend to commit a specific list of crimes, and I'm going to give you the list that you have to memorize, then you can be charged with murder. And we're going to go through each one of these individually so you have a very clear picture of what they mean. But I want you to first wrap your head around the idea malice does not mean you have to have evil intent. Let me give you an example. You see number 1, it says intent to kill. I'm going to give you an example of an intent to kill where the individual has this evil heart, and then I'm going to give you an example of an intent to kill, qualifies for murder, where we don't have an evil heart. The first one is, I don't like my sister-in-law. I go to Walmart, I grab a shotgun, I come home and I kill her. You know, I kill her because I don't like her. I kill her because she ate my food. I kill her because she sat in my chair. That's an evil heart, right? And I just take a shotgun and I intentionally pull the trigger and put a hole right through her chest. That's an intent to kill. That has an evil heart. That would fit under this intent to kill. I wanted to kill my sister-in-law. I bought a shotgun, put it to her chest, pulled the trigger. She's dead. Intent to kill. Let me change the facts a little bit. I have a wife, a loving wife. I've been married to her for 55 years. We're both old people. My wife is dying of cancer. This is a woman I truly love, I care about. She's part of my life. And I realize that she's dying of cancer and it's a very slow death. And every day it's just a painful. I watch her every day to go through pain. We have to keep her on morphine. It's a miserable life that she's living. Hour by hour, day to day, the cancer is slowly eating her alive. To put her out of her misery, I take a pillow and I cover her head and I take her life. Because I know now she's at peace and she will not suffer. The doctor told me she would die within the next week. But I don't want her to suffer another week, and I put a pillow over her head and I intentionally kill her. That is murder. Even though my heart is a pure heart, even though my heart is doing it to save my wife from any more pain, I could be charged with murder and convicted of murder because my intent was to kill. And it was unlawful killing. So this video is about ready to run out. I'll see you in part 5 in just a few minutes.